Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes to me from Alex Straza, who says, I find something interesting. You say you're feminist and for equality, yet when you do your small comedy skit, you have yourself and around 4 to 5 stuffed animal characters, if I'm not mistaken, and not one of them are female. Why? Well, actually, one of them is female. Millicent, the husky, is female, as I know that you know from reading the discussion in the comment thread under your question. But nonetheless, your point stands. I do fancy myself a feminist, and all of the characters, except for one in the Stephen Stuffy videos, are male. And in fact, until relatively recently, the female character was voiced by a male, this guy right here. And even though my lovely wife has been gracious enough to take over the voice of Millicent and to perform that character, to date all of the videos have still been written by me. There are always these problems when men try to express feminist points of view, try to voice like a feminist perspective, or be sensitive or inclusive to female characters or female points of view. I mean, there's a very obvious problem with that, which is it is an alien point of view to us. And I think that's what your question is really getting at. Anytime that a member of a relatively privileged group writes a story, or even an opinion piece, does any sort of commentary or any kind of storytelling in any form that deals with issues faced by members of underprivileged groups, there's going to be some tension, and there's going to be some trouble. There's going to be some problems there. So it is something that's on my mind. It is something that I think about. And the point of your question is very well taken. Joseph Fopiano. Hey Steve, I'm a journalism major at the University of Missouri, and my aspiration is to be a film critic. I even spent the last few years working on a list of what I consider to be the 100 best movies of all time. If you'd like to see the list, I'd love your feedback. You being as well versed in film as you are, do you have any advice for me? And I asked Joseph to send me his list of films, which he was kind enough to do. And the thing that struck me, first of all, as I've said in these videos before, and whenever I've talked about, top 100 or top 10 lists about movies, or the only practical use that these lists have for me is to give people who love movies something to talk about. They stir discussion, because it's silly. If I were to make a list of what I thought would be the 100 greatest movies of all time, and I were to compare it to yours, and then you and I were to have a discussion about this, Joseph, and I were to say, oh, you picked so-and-so as number 88, but I had it as number 85, and my number 88 was actually this. Like, to me, that's just completely semantic and silly. The only advice I could ever give an aspiring critic, and keep in mind, I have never worked professionally as a film critic. I review movies occasionally on this YouTube channel, because it's something that I love to talk about. And Jason Harding and I have our movie review show on his YouTube channel that we do, again, for the same reason, because we just love talking about movies. Neither of us are professional critics, and nor have we ever been. But the only advice I could give is just develop the skill, develop the knack for watching a movie, figuring out what your response to it is, be it positive or negative or somewhere in between. Figure out why you are responding that way, what in the movie is evoking that response, and then be able to articulate it. One of the best advice I ever got for critiquing anything, I got not even in a film class, but in a music appreciation class in college, where one of our first classes, our professor said, you know what, there's a lot of terminology, there's a lot of vocabulary in music criticism that you will have to learn eventually if you do this for any length of time, but the best thing you can do when you start out is listen to the piece and just describe what you hear. Describe what it sounds like, describe how it makes you feel, describe what you think of it. And that's the best way a film critic can work too. Even after you're in college, you're going for journalism, you probably know a lot of the lingo at this point, but whether you do or not, the best advice for any critic is, if you're a film critic, watch the film. Be conscious of your response to the film. Articulate that response. Explain what the movie is and why you feel about it the way you do. The Bible Reloaded. Hey Steve, we all know you are a huge Batman fan. I was just wondering what you thought of Fox's new show Gotham. I was able to catch the pilot episode, and while it certainly had problems, mostly in the dialogue, I still felt it has the potential to be an interesting interpretation of the Bat mythos. What are your thoughts on the show? By the time I'm sitting here answering this question, I've seen the pilot episode and also the second episode of the show. And at this point, I don't know. I feel like it could wind up being like an entertainingly bad show. It could sort of steer into the skid and embrace the camp and embrace the outrageousness and become an entertaining show. I don't really see it working as a serious show. I feel like, and we're only 2 episodes in. I don't know how long the show is going to wind up being on. I don't know if the ratings will hold up and it will get a second season. I don't know if it'll finish this first season. I have no idea what's going to happen with this show. But at this point, it feels like the show is still in the mode of wanting to work as drama. Wanting me to care about the characters, wanting me to have some emotional stake in what happens to them. And I'm just not anywhere near that. It's troubled by a lot of the things that prequels are troubled by, in that it wants to show you young versions of characters you're familiar with, but at the same time, it wants to include as much familiar stuff as possible so that it doesn't alienate casual fans. So that if someone tunes in just not even caring about Batman's backstory, but just thinking, oh, Gotham, a Batman show, let me see what this is about, they will have something to hold on to. There'll be enough familiar things in the show that they'll be able to say, oh, the Penguin, I know who that is. Oh, the Riddler, I know who that is. You know, oh, there's Bruce Wayne and Alfred. And no, that must be Commissioner Gordon. Like, there's enough familiar that people will be able to grab onto it. But it's still the young version of everybody. And the problem with that is it creates, it sort of creates a world where by the time you get to the point in the timeline where, you know, Bruce Wayne is all grown up and he's Batman, it's like all the characters have known each other for 20 years, which is a little weird. Like, so basically every major character in Batman's life has been a part of his life since he was 10 years old. Drunken Prophet 23. Hey Steve, I'm an atheist, but I'm in love with a Catholic girl. We have almost everything in common. We were best friends for a year before entering a relationship that lasted another year. I fully believe we were deeply in love. However, the religious differences ended up becoming too much for her. She's afraid if we were to get married and have kids, they might think like I do and end up in hell. We've been split up now for almost 4 months, and I still love her deeply. I think about her every day. I'm even tempted to try and become a Catholic, or at least fake it, in order to be with her, even though I disagree with nearly everything the Catholic Church teaches and stands for. I'm also not very good at dating/meeting new people. I don't know any women who are free thinkers like me, and I've tried online dating for almost a month with no luck. I'm genuinely unhappy, not depressed or suicidal or anything like that, just unhappy, and I see no end. I don't expect you to have the answers, but I'm a big fan, and it would be really cool to hear your thoughts, advice, any words of encouragement you might have. What do you think I should do? Well, the one thing you should not do is pretend to convert to Catholicism for the girl. That should be right off the table. I've said this before in videos in response to similar questions. Life is just too short to go through it pretending you are someone that you're not, to carry on a charade around other people just to make them happy when that is not who you are. I take you at your word that you guys really got along, that you really cared for each other, but you know, sometimes it just doesn't work out. I mean, if she was really that troubled by the prospect of you guys eventually having kids and the kids taking after their atheistic father and going to hell, like, as crazy as that sounds to me, as nuts as that is to me to think that people would actually have that as a real concern in the year 2014 in the United States of America, in an educated, sophisticated society, if she really felt that way, then you shouldn't be together. I mean, maybe that's harsh. Maybe that sucks for you because you really love her, and maybe it sucks for her too because she really loved you. But if that's how she feels, maybe as sad as you are now, as unhappy as you are now, it's for the best in the long run. Or maybe she will decide that your atheism isn't that big of a deal at some point. Or maybe you will decide that her Catholicism isn't that big of a deal at some point, and you'll come back together on your own terms, and you'll accept each other in ways that you're not capable of accepting each other now. I don't know. I don't want to tell you to wait for that to happen, because I don't know if that'll happen or not. The only encouragement I could offer you is that life is not over. You know, you might feel like this was the one for you, and you've let her slip away, or she's been taken from you because of something out of your control. Whatever you think is happening, whatever is happening, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of your life. And look, believe me, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to meet people. I know how difficult it can be to get to know new people, to get people to understand you and connect with you where you are. That is a horrible, dating for me was a horrible experience. Dating was the worst thing I ever had to do. And that's why I almost never did it. And I cannot express how fortunate I feel to have met my wife, to have met such an awesome woman who accepted me and got me and understood me, and just made it so easy. And not everybody is that fortunate. But if I can be that fortunate, then so can you be. And you never know, if you are going to meet that person, you never know where they're going to be, you never know who they're going to be, and you can't plan on it and you can't force it. You just have to hang in there until it happens. Mark Arangis. Hey Steve, I'm slowly coming to the end of a massive Tumblr blog post regarding Anita Sarkeesian. I'm into video games quite a bit. I even work in the industry, art department of a small studio. I find Anita's work pretty upsetting, and what bothers me is not that she is a feminist, because there is room for improvement regarding gender representation / roles in both the culture and the industry, but that she is just awful at being a pop culture critic / analyst. She really either misunderstands or misrepresents many of the games she is talking about, and I fear because of this she has made it harder for future critics of the industry that will have actual insight. I'd like to hear your thoughts, if any, since you're not a gamer. Maybe give me some food for thought before I finish that post. You're right that I'm not a gamer, but I am relatively familiar with film criticism, textual criticism, the sort of thing that I think Anita Sarkeesian is doing for video games. I'm well familiar with that sort of thing when applied to other forms, literature and film primarily, mostly film. And that's one of the reasons why I think the vitriol directed at Anita Sarkeesian is so out of proportion, is nothing she has done by the standards of criticism that I am familiar with, particularly criticism that is written for a popular audience, which again, I think Anita's series on video game tropes is intended for a wide audience. It's not primarily an academic exercise. Nothing she has said or done strikes me as remotely controversial. Now, you may disagree with her. You may disagree with her arguments. You may disagree with the points that she makes. You may disagree with the interpretation that she takes of certain games or certain features of certain games. But this is just part and parcel of particular critics having particular points of view and having particular theses in their criticism that they are arguing in favor of. It doesn't mean that she's intentionally misrepresenting things. It doesn't mean she's a liar. It doesn't mean she's being dishonest. It doesn't mean she's ripping off her Kickstarter funders. It doesn't mean any of the nefarious things. And Mark, you haven't accused her of any, you said misrepresenting, but you haven't accused her of any of the other things. And I'm not saying that you have. I'm just pointing out or reminding everybody watching of the cloud of hate that is surrounding Anita Sarkeesian. Nothing, and her work to me deserves none of that. You can think she's totally off base critically. You can think she is completely getting it wrong. You can say, I don't know where she's coming from. But as a critic, as an analyst, nothing she has done is outside the lines. And in terms of pointing out sexist tropes in video games, it seems to me like it's a fairly straightforward, uncontroversial hypothesis that video games, like other forms of popular media, contain a great deal of sexist gender stereotyping that depicts women in a very limited, often very negative light. I don't see how that's a controversial statement. Sepia Siren, my question, why do people hate on sex scenes in movies, or sex anything for that matter? Porn, erotica. I enjoy them as much as any other type of media and put them in their proper place and scope. I hate when I hear someone lament that a sex scene in a film somehow demeaned the film in some way or lowered its quality. Why? Sex is a natural part of life, and in my humble opinion, the way a person interacts via sex can say a lot about their character and personality. So it can make sense to show two characters relating this way. Are they playful, intense, jaded, selfish? Does showing a man eating a hamburger demean film? Sex is a biological drive just like eating, so what's the difference? Naughty bits? I just don't get it. When did sex get relegated to the same role as taking a dump when it comes to subject matter we shouldn't show in film? And I've heard less complaints when someone is actually shown taking a dump than when sex choreography is used in filmmaking. Thoughts? I do think it says something about our society, about our standards, about where our head is at culturally, that the depiction of graphic sex in movies is almost always viewed as far more controversial than the depiction of graphic violence. You're right, and I agree with you, that when used properly, when used artistically, when used for the purposes of revealing character, that it can be a very effective storytelling tool, showing characters, letting us take a peek at their sex life. I think one of the reasons why it has a stigma attached to it is because it has been used inartfully so often. And I'm talking just about in mainstream movies and even in, more artful types of movies. Unfortunately, because it is so titillating, because we are so turned on by it, it has been used gratuitously and not for the sort of higher artistic purposes that it might be used for, and that it has been used for many times. Sam Clemens, RIGL. Hey Steve, as a film buff, I'm curious, what films that you watched when you were young stick with you the most? Which, in your opinion, still hold up, and which, if any, fall flat on their face in subsequent viewing looking back? Thanks. Well, when I was very young, my favorite movies were things like the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, or the Karate Kid movies. I remember I had a VHS tape of the Karate Kid Part 2 that I had taped from a television airing, and I wore that thing out. I watched it over and over and over and over again. And I still love those Karate Kid movies, especially the first two, but for very different reasons. They don't hold up as like really good movies to me anymore. I consider them quality cheese, but I still love them and have such a fun time whenever I watch them. On the other hand, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, again, at least the first two, hold up very well as legitimate movies. I can't say the same thing for the Tim Burton Batman movies. When the Tim Burton Batman movies came out, I was 9 and 12, respectively, for Batman and Batman Returns. And when I first saw them, I thought they were just awesome. I fucking loved those movies. I thought they were some of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Now I watch them as an adult, and I have a nostalgic affection for them, but I don't think they're very good movies. Either one of them. I admire some things about them. I think they have great set design. I think they have great art direction, but as movies overall, I don't think they're good at all. And there are a lot of movies that I respond to that way. There are very few films I can think of that I loved as a youngster that I don't still like now, but I just like them in very different ways. I like them for nostalgia, or I like them as quality cheese, so bad they're good sorts of things. The movies I remember loving as a child that I still love today in more or less the same ways are just the sorts of movies that I think a lot of people like. The movies that are classics from the perspective of all ages that have stood the test of time in that way. Stuff like Star Wars and some of the Star Trek movies, and as I mentioned a minute ago, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. Okay. I kind of ran out of steam on that answer, so I decided I would just do a jump cut and then wait for the thunder sound effect for the lightning round, so I'm just hang on a second. It's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Radical Bacon. What do your stuffed animals think of your cat? There is an uneasy truce between Audie and the stuffed animals. They usually don't bother each other. Occasionally, Toby Benson has reached out and tried to make friends with Audie. Audie is usually not terribly receptive to that. Toby has taken a few claws to the face. He just doesn't learn his lesson. Simon the Program. Next question. Steve, do you have any ideas for atheist movies? I have ideas for movies where characters are atheists. I don't really have any ideas for like didactically atheist movies, like atheist message movies. I don't really have any of those. That's not really the kind of thing I'm interested in. But I do have ideas for movies where the lead, the major characters, or at least one of the major characters, would be clearly an atheist and be that sort of a character in the story. And by the way, you also asked if you can use me saying your name in your intro video. Yes, Simon the Program. You can use me saying your name in your intro video. Thank you for asking. Little Millington 1. Steve, I was talking to someone at my school about morality, and we ended up talking about false hope. Personally, I think it is worse to give someone false hope than no hope at all in most scenarios, but the other person disagreed with me, saying that he is fine with giving false hope to people. I would like to know your thoughts. Is it okay to give someone false hope? I don't think so. I think giving people false hope is a horrible thing. I think it's an evil thing. I don't think it's okay. I disagree with your friend who thinks it's okay to give people false hope. I fall down on the other side of that. BG6B7BFT. Did Emma Watson's speech at the UN make your nipples hard too? If by that you mean, did I think it was a fine speech and the sort of thing that I really appreciated hearing and wish we would hear more of and hope will lead to positive changes for women and girls around the world, as well as men's attitudes toward them in the future, then yes, it did. Biri Shahar. Hi, Steve. Would you consider making a spin-off to An Atheist Reads called A Liberal Reads, where you read and debunk conservative literature like Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, although I realize these two are gargantuan reads, especially the latter. The only thing is, I think instead of calling that A Liberal Reads, I would have to call it A Liberal Tries to Read, Gets Frustrated, and then throws himself out a window. So I might not want to do that. Warp Rules. Hi, Steve. I don't know if you have been asked this before, but I was watching your latest Off Monday Ramble, and I thought, as a writer, what do you think of Stephen King? Actually, I think the only Stephen King novel that I've ever read straight from beginning to end was The Stand, which, of course, is like a phone book, like just a massive tome. But I read The Stand when I was a teenager, and I've read a few of his short stories here and there. I like him as a writer. I think he has a very obvious, very, how should I say, very distinctive style, very distinctive voice as a writer. Actually, some of the Stephen King work that I've appreciated the most has not even been his fiction, but he's written quite a bit on the art of writing. A lot of Stephen King's essays on writing are very insightful and have been really, really valuable and very something that I have really appreciated, even more so than the relatively small amount of his fiction that I've read. This is 3D. What advice would you give to someone who is trying to get a book published? Is self-publishing the way to go for someone that isn't a big name, or should I look into having someone at a big company giving it a read? I would prefer to not have to pay someone a ridiculous fee just to consider looking at it, but at the same time, there are things that only get done with monetary backing. Thanks. If all you care about is having a book in your hand that you wrote, then go ahead and self-publish. But if you want to publish something that you have any hope of either having some sort of cultural cachet or relevance, or that you could possibly earn some money from, then I think you have to get it published by a traditional publisher. And the best way to do that is to try and get yourself an agent. To get yourself an agent who can then submit your work to publishers and get people to look at it. That is not going to be easy. That's going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult. You're going to have to pursue people and be dogged, and also continue to up your game as a writer and to put forward the best possible product you can and get it out there in front of people, and eventually hopefully find someone who believes in you and gets what you're doing and is willing to represent you. That's not going to be easy, and you might not even be able to do it. You may try your best and just not make it, but you should be prepared for that. But I think that's what you would have to do. If all you care about is the book, self-publish. If you care about being a writer, being an author, then I think you have to find an agent and you have to be published by a publishing house. Randy Owens, hey Steve, still wondering about the pen. Parker, Cross, something fancier, something cheaper? You know what? I don't even remember. I'm going to have to look. It is a Zebra F402. So I'm going to guess cheaper. I'm pretty sure I got it at Staples. So not a terribly expensive pen. Actually, the reason I got this pen as opposed to some other pen is because the design of the clip is such that the clip is not likely to break off, given how often I pull it on and off of the shirt. Clip durability was very important to me when I chose that pen. And I chose well, because it's lasted quite a few years. Jason Konis, what movie has made you cry? You know what, when I was a little kid, speaking of Sam Clemens's question before the lightning round, movies that I used to enjoy as a kid, when I was young, the movie The Land Before Time used to really, really get me. I think that might be the only movie I've ever watched that has actually made me cry. The end, the end, when they reach the Great Valley and Littlefoot's grandfather or grandmother, whoever is there, his grandparents, I think it's both of them, his grandparents are there. That movie just gets me, or at least it got me at the time. I haven't watched it for years. There have been other movies that have made me come close, that have made me feel like I was going to cry, but I haven't actually shed tears. But Land Before Time, I think, is the only movie that's ever actually made me cry. And I was maybe 6 or 7 when it did, so there you go. Since then, my heart has turned to cold ice. Hey, that's it for the questions. Before I get out of here, I want to give a shout out. And the shout out this week goes, as it goes every week, to a very, very deserving channel. This week, the shout out belongs to Atheist Analysis. And I can speak from personal experience as to how awesome the Atheist Analysis YouTube channel is, because I was a guest on the Atheist Analysis Google Hangout show last week. It was an awesome experience. We had a really great, intelligent conversation about religious concepts of good and evil, about the Old Testament and the New Testament, and whether God can be all-loving and all-powerful. Just all these really classic, intractable questions raised by religion and in the nature of evil. It was a great discussion, and they have those sorts of discussions with atheists and also sometimes with Christians. Very thoughtful, thought-provoking discussions on a weekly basis, and it's an awesome channel. It's a great place for discussion and for discovering new promising members of the atheist community who hopefully will come to participate in this conversation and define our community going into the future, some of whom will be receiving individual shout-outs in the weeks to come. So, Atheist Analysis, if you are not watching their stuff, do yourself a favor. Go to the Atheist Analysis YouTube channel and check out their shows. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Well, that is it for me. I'm going to get out of here. I will be back to do this again next week, provided, of course, that you guys ask me some questions, because in order for me to do this, you have to ask. So leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next episode. So I'll see you in the next episode, and until then, take care, everybody.